Welcome to episode 45 of the Self-Care 101 podcast, helping you to crush overwhelm, stay focused and live better, with your host, Puja K. McClymont. Thank you so much for listening today. In this episode, I'm going to talk about how you can build resilience. Obviously, we're all going through a super tough time right now with the pandemic, the recession, the ever-changing landscape of uncertainty, and it's quite frankly a bit too much, right? So, how can building resilience help? Do you even have the strength to be able to build resilience right now? Trying to build resilience in our current situation isn't going to be the easiest thing you'll do, but if you can find the time to just do some little things, it will really help you to bounce back after any other adversity that might come your way as your life goes on. So at the time that this show goes live, we are in the midst of a global crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's been a really testing time for so many people. When you are able to build resilience through such a life-changing time in your life, you are going to reap those rewards long after we come out the other side. So what I want to do in this show is explore a little bit about what building resilience means, how you can build resilience right now, and quite importantly, actually, the difference between being resilient and being strong. So what does resilience mean? Quite simply, resilience is the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. So you might hear somebody bounces back really quickly from adversity. This means that the benefits of building resilience are going to help you create a super strong mindset that you can apply to anything in your life. Now, resilience often gets confused with being mentally strong because they obviously carry similar qualities, but there is a difference, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later on. There is a little bit of a difference between resilience and strength. So how can you build resilience, especially right now? There are so many ways you can build resilience, from finding purpose to writing lists to meditating to removing yourself from certain situations. And what I've done is I've picked out two things that are probably the easiest ones that you can do, and I personally think the most powerful and most effective. These two things you can actually carry on doing, for the rest of your life and apply it to so many different things. So I think these are the most important ones. So the first one is by having purpose for what you do. Now, this purpose is in everything you do. So it's your work, your family time, fun with friends, and how you look after yourself. Obviously, the most important. Now, when you have a clear purpose for why you do all these things, you're going to find it a lot easier to build resilience when difficulties, like a pandemic, arise. You'll know the difference between yourself and somebody else. If you are reading the news, watching the news, and something happens, like, for instance, now there's talk of a second lockdown and COVID having, wider spread. So that's sort of creating anxiety and fear amongst a lot of us, everybody. But everybody's fears and anxieties are actually going to be quite different. What are you scared of? Are you scared of contracting COVID? Are you scared of the effects of lockdown on your mental well-being? Are you scared of not being able to see your loved ones? There's so much fear there. Are you scared of losing your job? So everybody's going to have different fears in this sort of situation. But if you can find some purpose within all the things that you do, it can help you build that resilience so that if that happens, the second lockdown, you're in a much stronger place to be able to, in effect, bounce back from that situation. And it's not bouncing back without acknowledgement, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It's bouncing back mindfully, knowing that you can only control so much of the situation and the rest of it is out of your hands. Now, I talk about choice a lot, especially in the podcast, because everything does come down to choice. It will always be your choice whether you want to build resilience in your life or not. And it's important to feel your feelings, but there's also, there's a thin line between feeling your feelings and just wallowing. So if you choose to build resilience, then you choose to mindfully acknowledge your feelings so that you can move on from sadness or difficulties that you face. Now, I've already mentioned the best way you can build resilience. It's by having purpose, but how can you actually do that? So one of the ways that I suggest you do this is by asking yourself why you are doing a particular task, activity, or life choice. Now, we tend to be conditioned by society, our parents, with regards to the choices that we make in life, only to find out later down the line that we didn't actually make those decisions. Knowing what matters to you by clearly defining your values, that's what's going to help you reach the answers that you seek from purpose. So you could build resilience and purpose, discover purpose through meditation. Now, there's lots of different types of meditation. You do not have to do traditional meditation. If that doesn't speak to you, that's okay. You don't have to do it. But if you are able to take part in some form of meditation, you're going to find this exercise is going to help you to open up more, and it's going to get you in touch with your innate resilience. You know, that resilience that you were kind of born with, that got sort of stripped away by other people's fears and anxieties and the news. Think about how much you've read in your lifetime and how much you've experienced in your lifetime. All that is sort of like piling on top of each other. Every experience is another layer of stress, anxiety, which weakens your innate resilience. So meditation is a superb exercise that will help further strengthen your resolve as your practice develops. It's something you've got to do all the time. It's not sort of like you go to an hour's meditation class and ta-da, you can find purpose. Meditation is a skill. It takes practice. And I've said this 100 million trillion times on my podcast, in my blogs, on videos, everywhere. You don't have to do traditional meditation. Just walk. You're walking with intention. Just walk. Give your stresses away to the earth. Just walk. That is the best way of meditating. That is the best way of connecting back to yourself, finding purpose and understanding who you are. It's the easiest way. Everybody can do it. So that is my big recommendation in this episode for learning how to meditate. So what you're doing here with meditation is it's a mindful intention to be stronger. So you're choosing this activity to mindfully, you're making that conscious, active choice to be stronger. And you're training your mind, in essence, to bounce back from adversity in the quickest and healthiest way possible, essentially so that you can prevent more serious challenges with your mental well-being. Because if you can't learn to bounce back from adversity in an efficient way that suits you, that makes sense to you, that's comfortable, it's not denial, it's genuine bouncing back, you are going to help protect your mental well-being better. You really are. So the other thing, which is really a little bit odd actually, the other example I'm going to give you, the other way you can build resilience, is by planning. Now, I know it sounds odd that I would choose planning of all the other things that I talked about earlier on in the show, but planning is a really, really effective tool. If you're a careful planner, you'll be able to build resilience extremely effectively. So this type of planning, it falls into the psychological therapy of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And in this instance, we're referring to creating solutions for the challenges you may face. If you're someone who listens to the podcast regularly, you'll hear me talk about find solutions for your challenges, create solutions, list down your problems and create solutions. Be prepared. I do this a lot because I think CBT, and I think most people, actually I shouldn't say everybody, but most people that I know that have experienced CBT for their life experiences and traumas have raved about the benefits of learning that therapy. It is so amazingly effective and it really helps anyone to build resilience. It really does. So I'm a big fan, as you can hear. And now CBT takes practice and a concerted effort on your part to consistently strive to bounce back by using those new techniques that you've learned. So it's not just a case of, oh yeah, I'm going to create the solutions. You've actually got to go to them when the problem occurs. Over time, you won't need to refer to a piece of paper or a booklet or a post-it note. You'll actually just do it naturally, but you've got to do it every time. And you can practice on little things, like if somebody cancels a date with you, that shouldn't be as life-changing as a pandemic and lockdown and not being able to control your life the way you'd like to. So in that instance, that's a good way of practicing what sort of solutions you've created. So the easiest way to do this is in 2 stages. The first is by reflecting back on your life and reviewing adverse experiences that you've had and asking yourself, what did you do then to help you bounce back? What did I do then that helped me bounce back? Because essentially you did, because you're here today. Now, once you've listed them, you've got a concrete list of examples of your own strength, your resolve, and that is what will help you build resilience towards any new challenges that you face in the present. The second step is to review your fears and to try to create a fail-safe list almost of solutions to those fears. Now, again, it's important that these are relevant to you, that they come naturally and that they can be sustained over time. That's what's going to help you build resistance. It's so important that they make sense to you, that they are doable solutions, not sort of, oh, I'm just going to ignore it and I'm just going to think positively. It's too broad. It's too broad. If you're in a negative space, it takes a lot of work to get your head out of that space. But what can you do? Is it listening to happy music? Is it dancing around? Is it looking at a particular painting? Is it colouring books? Is it going for a walk? What is it that could help you bounce back from an adverse experience in the present? So I mentioned earlier in the show that there is a difference between resilience and strength. And I wanted to touch upon this because I've often been referred to as a strong person. And in my coaching practice, I tend to actually attract quite a lot of strong people. And the interesting thing is that people have a perception of strong people that they are super resilient. They rarely have any vulnerable feelings. They don't let the world bother them. But actually, strong people are probably the most sensitive to challenges. What they've done is they've learned to create almost a baseline of where their strength lies. And it might be a little bit higher than most, but they've created that, and they've created their own ways of protecting themselves from harmful, hurtful situations. Now, resilience and strength get used quite interchangeably, and it is obviously understandable because I think that the line of difference is pretty thin. In the most simple senses, resilience is dynamic. You just need to get through that particular adversity or challenge at that moment or in the shortest amount of time. It's a way of managing your emotions so that you can filter what doesn't serve you and then focus on moving forward. Now, with strength, this is something that you build over time and it becomes your constant state, or like I said, your baseline. So what this means is that in general, when things go wrong, you might be hurt, troubled, scared, whatever, but you acknowledge it and you accept that you might be upset, but you won't get upset beyond a certain point or amount of time. Another way to look at how to build resilience is to take on the mindset that being adaptable will create a more positive and stable reaction. Being adaptable will create a more positive and stable reaction. Something to consider. It's funny, when I'm preparing for these podcasts, I sort of write them based on things that I'm reading and researching and what I think people might find useful from conversations I've been having. And I always, when I'm writing them, I think about my own life and my own experiences and how the topic, for instance, relates to me as well, and whether those sorts of experiences that I have may resonate with other people. And I like to bring those in because I don't mind talking about myself in terms of giving an example of something that I might be talking about on the show, so that it just becomes a little bit more clearer. Otherwise, I'm talking quite generally, and I don't like to use too many client examples because I feel like their confidentiality should be protected a little bit. So I did think about this when I was writing this particular show, and I thought about some things that have hurt my feelings over the years, but I've actually managed to bounce back. And it's not necessarily from other people. It's just sort of things that happen in life that, I'm sure quite a few of you can relate to. So I thought I'd share a couple of examples of what sort of things have hurt me and how I've bounced back from them. And maybe there's something useful there. Who knows? So one of the things that hurts a lot, actually, I'm not going to lie, it does hurt a lot, is not getting support from people that I support. So these are people that I wholeheartedly support. I'm there for you, drop of a hat, things like that. If you need me to like a post on social media, I'm going to do that. You want me to share something, I'm there for you. Now, obviously, these feelings are my feelings, the way I choose to feel from this kind of scenario, and they're based in my expectations of others, which the show. If you're an avid listener of the podcast, that expectation show. I think I've even talked about it twice, so I'm not going to talk about it again here, but yes, these are my expectations of others, and it's something that's going to be, I think, quite, a few more years of learning how to keep bouncing back from that. But I can also see from a compassionate or from a coaching perspective why people may not be supporting me. And that's obviously helpful. These are great skills to have, but I'm a human being. It still hurts, right? It still hurts. Now, I don't lash out. I mean, I might lash out on my own in the house if no one's here, but I don't lash out. Instead, I generally will rant about it, but I won't give it any more life than speaking about it once or a maximum of 2 times if it's really bothered me. And also, ladies who are listening, always be mindful of time of the month. Okay, PMS can really mess with your rationality. So definitely always, when you react to something like that with other people and your expectations of others, sometimes it's not all you, hun. It could be your hormones. So it's always worth checking the calendar if you feel something might be a little bit disproportionate. But these sorts of things allow you to, over time, bounce back and not get so uptight. I remember in my 20s when, say it was something similar, that I didn't have a friend support me on something. And it could be just as simple as they didn't say congratulations to something that I had achieved, which I thought they would because they're my friend and I thought we support each other on these things. But if they didn't give me that sort of congratulatory support that I was seeking, I would wallow in that self-pity for days, I'd sit there with the wine and I would keep giving the story life. I would phone 10 different friends over the course of a week, 2 weeks, just talking about this same thing that happened, the same indiscretion, and not achieving anything, obviously. All I was doing was just giving it more life, more air, more breath, and just feeding more negativity, feeding more insecurity. And what happened in the end? I felt like crap, didn't I? I felt rubbish. So this was something that on my journey, I guess, in my journey, because it's constant, it's something that I really wanted to be able to get a hold of within myself. I wanted to grow from it. I didn't want to keep repeating this same cycle because, gosh, if I look back in my 20s, I can't, there are so many weeks and months that I have lost to unnecessary thought for things that in the grand scheme of things, don't really matter. I can validate myself. I can congratulate myself. I do have a supportive circle around me. And so long as they continue to support me, why am I trying to get anyone else to support me right now? Do I need it? But that's a whole other show. So I think you get the point there. And then the other one is more personal, which I'm sure that a lot of people can resonate with, because it's whether you have a job or your own business. When you work so hard, you do all the hours, you do all the things you're supposed to do. Sometimes you forego your self-care, your care for others that you love, fun. How many cancelled dates or things we've said no to because you're working so hard. But the rewards come so slow, don't they? They come back so slow. And gosh, it can be debilitating and really difficult to bounce back day after day. But I want to share a couple of things that I do, because it's important to share where I am in this journey as well. Now, I work very hard and some of my rewards do come super slow. Luckily, coming from a marketing career, I understand why things would be so slow and what I would need to do to change that. But the other way that I do it is that I look at my vision boards. That's like my biggest thing. I have them all around the house and I look at them when I'm feeling like, when's it going to happen? When are things going to change? I look at my affirmations. I totally do the post-it thing. If you're a listener to the show and the post-its, I put post-it affirmations all over the gaff. I really do. And most importantly, I review my purpose for doing what I do. In this instance, talking about the coaching business, I do this because of the result of working with clients. And, I get bonuses because I've been lucky enough to work with some incredible people and they're in my life, like I would never have met them otherwise. So I get a double win, I guess, is the best way of looking at it. And the reason why I do all those things is because I'm going to keep going. I am going to keep going. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe the purpose for what I'm doing it for. It's just going to happen when it's supposed to happen. Because you know what? The alternative is complete and utter failure. Now, if you know anything about me, I refuse to accept failure. So I soldier on. But it takes effort. And like I say, looking at the vision boards, the affirmations, the purpose for why I'm doing what I'm doing, all of that is really important to keep my resilience up, to allow me to keep bouncing back day after day. And the other thing that I thought might be helpful to talk about is fear of the unknown. Now, things that I can't control, like right now, we're in a recession. So it makes everything that much harder financially, right? I mean, everything harder. So what are we talking about here? The uncertain job market, the price of goods, since we're not in the EU now, rising housing costs, as well as house prices. I mean, it's almost impossible to do anything that you really want to do unless you're a big earner, which, what's the reality? Most of us are not. Or even if we are, we're still going to be super mindful of how we spend our money right now. Understandably, totally understandably, of course. But it still weighs heavy on so many of us, doesn't it? If you're not living the way you were living 3 or 4 months ago, you are going to feel that change. It's one thing to choose that change yourself, to make a conscious decision to make those changes in your life. It's another to have it taken from you, out of your control. And that's not necessarily something that we're equipped to deal with, because as adults, we're essentially creating our own futures. We're creating our own lives. We're making our own choices. No one's telling us what to do. And then all of a sudden, something comes into play. In this instance, you could say nature, because it's a virus. But something comes into play out of our control, and it turns our lives upside down. So it's completely understandable that it's going to weigh heavy on so many of us. So this is where building resilience so that you can continue on your course or your path. That's why it's so super, super beneficial. And believing that this will pass is so important. So important. If I was writing this show in capital letters with loads of O's after the S, so important. I cannot stress that enough. This will pass. Okay, it will pass. We don't know when. We don't know how. We don't know what life will look like on the other side. We're kind of on a little bit of the other side, but we're still very much in that space of uncertainty. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. I acknowledge that. But there is a way to build resilience, even if you don't take heed of anything else that I've said in this show, which, is perfectly fine. If you just take heed of the fact that it will pass, this whole scenario will pass. And I'm not saying that it's going to be better on the other side. I'm not saying that at all. It's going to be different. And we have to choose how we're going to handle different, what that could be, what's in your control, what's not in your control. And I'm going to stress this last point again, because we are spending so much time on social media. I've recently been reading quite a few reports on the effects of social media on mental well-being, and it's quite troubling. So I do want to stress this probably as much as I can, whenever I can, but really be careful with your social media use. I'm pro social media. I'm on social media, so it really does have its good points. But if you're feeling negative thoughts, social media is going to feed into them more. So just be mindful and literally step away from it by walking, listening to music, chatting to someone you like. Literally walk away from social media, walk away from your phone, your technology, whatever it is, and step away from that space, even if just to get some perspective, clear your head, etc. But just do that, because right now, where we're in various different bubbles, we are more susceptible to negative thinking. And depending on the different scenarios that we're in, whether we've lost work, whether we're scared of being made redundant, whether we are struggling financially, our health, family, all those everythings that's going on, negative thoughts are going to naturally occur more often than in inverted commas normal life because of our situation. So that's why it's so important, as much as you can, to do a physical step away. And finally, a couple of other ways you could build resilience is like with work. I think I'll touch upon work very quickly, but I'll write a couple of blog posts specifically for work and health, which you might find helpful. So check out the website when you can. So if you want to build resilience in work, you may look at what causes you to harbor negativity. So this negativity that you might be feeling towards work could be rooted in something else. So it might be worth just looking at that. You might also want to build resilience towards your motivation for your health goals. And that could take the shape of affirmations, that could be vision boards. So there's various different things you can do for different areas of your life to help build resilience. So you assess your life, you see where you are. If you haven't got purpose, if you don't have a meditative practice, maybe you could apply that to all the areas of your life that you feel are lacking. And over time, I promise you, it's going to really help you with building resilience. I mean, you can also find like guided meditations on the apps or in a class. There's still online classes going on, but look for a guided meditation on resilience, on strength building. They're really, really helpful, and guided meditations, probably the easiest way of doing it. And you can listen to them on your walk as well. And finally, when building resilience, the key theme with all the areas of your life is that of purpose. Without purpose, you cannot strengthen your resilience. It's a skill that requires practice, but it is a skill that can be learned and strengthened so that you can bounce back from adversity with mindful efficiency. Take care, guys. Thank you for listening to the Self-Care 101 podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would subscribe, rate and review so that other people like you can find the show. For more tips and tricks, you can follow me on the socials at Frankly Coaching or visit my website to find out more about my coaching programs and how to work with me at franklycoaching.com. Talk to you soon.